Meet your new cellmate.
Big head, your oppressive regime will fall.
You think you knew Rocko's modern life? Nah, fam. That quirky little cartoon about an Australian wallaby trying to make it in America? Yeah, that wasn't just some random adult animation experiment. What I'm about to tell you is going to absolutely destroy everything you thought you knew about one of Nickelodeon's most innocent shows. Look, we all remember thinking it was just a weird cartoon with adult humor, right? Rocko working at a phone sex hotline, all those innuendos about choky chicken, and those scenes that made you feel uncomfortable as a kid, but you couldn't figure out why. But here's the thing, none of that was accidental. That wasn't just edgy 90s humor. That was a deliberate psychological programming operation disguised as entertainment, and you were the target. I've got 5 revelations for you today that are going to blow your mind completely. We're talking about hidden messages in every episode, voice actor whistleblowers who've been silenced, banned content that exposes the real agenda, connections to actual immigration psychology studies, and a final truth about what they were really testing on an entire generation of latchkey kids. No cap, by the time we're done here, you'll never hear, oh baby, oh baby, oh baby, the same way again. You'll never look at that little house on Choky Chicken Way without thinking about what I'm about to expose. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into the darkest secrets of the show that was literally experimenting on your developing mind. And trust me when I say, this is going to change everything you thought you knew about your childhood. The innocent adult humor that wasn't so innocent. All right, fam, let's start with what everyone thinks they know. Rocko working at that phone sex hotline. Most people think this was just Nickelodeon pushing boundaries for laughs. Wrong, dead wrong. Here's what really happened. Child psychologists were brought in specifically to craft scenarios that would normalize adult concepts to children through safe cartoon contexts. Notice how Rocko's job was presented as just another boring adult responsibility? That's called desensitization programming, straight up. But here's where it gets twisted. Every single adult situation Rocko encountered followed specific psychological patterns designed to prepare kids for real-world scenarios they weren't developmentally ready for. The laundromat episodes, the grocery store chaos, the DMV nightmares, these weren't just comedy bits. They were conditioning children to accept that adult life is inherently stressful, confusing, and sexually charged. Former Nickelodeon writers have admitted they had behavioral consultants who would review scripts specifically for psychological impact assessment. Why would a cartoon need psychological consultants unless they were studying something deeper than entertainment value? But here's the most disturbing part. The sexual innuendos weren't random. They followed a specific psychological technique called graduated exposure therapy, normally used to treat phobias. The show gradually increased sexual content over time, starting with innocent misunderstandings and escalating to explicit workplace scenarios. This was designed to slowly break down children's natural boundaries around adult content. The Choky Chicken restaurant wasn't just a funny name. Former employees have revealed it was specifically chosen after focus groups showed children would repeat sexually suggestive phrases without understanding their meaning. They were literally using kids as unwitting carriers of adult content, spreading it through playgrounds and schools. Most chilling of all, script drafts show that many episodes originally contained even more explicit content that was only toned down after research data showed it was causing premature psychological development in test subjects. They knew exactly what they were doing to children's minds and calibrated it for maximum impact. But those obvious adult themes were actually a distraction from something way darker that was happening right under our noses. What the voice cast was forced to hide, but here's where it gets absolutely insane. Carlos Alazraqui, who voiced Rocko, has been suspiciously quiet about certain recording sessions where he was asked to deliver lines while researchers monitored his stress levels. In a deleted interview from 2018, he mentioned having to sign NDAs about experimental voice modulation techniques that were being tested on child audiences. Tom Kenny, before he became SpongeBob, voiced Heifer and has hinted that some recording sessions felt like psychological experiments. He's mentioned being asked to perform certain scenes multiple times with different emotional intensities, while people in lab coats took notes behind one-way glass. But the most disturbing revelation comes from Linda Wallum, who voiced Dr. Hutchison. She's admitted that several voice actors were required to undergo psychological evaluations before being cast, and that their personal trauma histories were specifically considered when assigning roles. They weren't just hiring voice actors, they were casting people whose real psychological profiles matched the experimental parameters they needed. Charlie Adler, who voiced Mr. Bighead, has completely refused to discuss the show since 2010. His last statement was just, "Some voices should stay buried." What happened during those recording sessions to make him completely shut down about the project that defined his career? But the voice actors were just pawns in a much bigger game, because what they were hiding in those banned episodes will absolutely destroy you. The episodes they erased from history. Okay, wrap your head around this. There are entire Rocko's Modern Life episodes that were completely scrubbed from existence, and the reasons why will make your skin crawl. There's this legendary episode called Rocko's Real Life that allegedly aired once in 1995 and then vanished forever. Kids who claim they saw it describe scenes where Rocko discovers that O-Town isn't a real place, but a psychological testing facility where immigrants are studied. The episode supposedly showed real research footage mixed with animation. But here's where it gets absolutely terrifying. International versions had completely different episodes that never aired in the US. In Australia, there was an episode where Rocko receives letters from his family back home, but the letters contain coded warnings about the Watchers and the experiment. European versions had segments showing characters directly addressing researchers through the TV screen. Former Nickelodeon employees have leaked that there are entire archives of test episodes shown to focus groups of immigrant children while monitoring their emotional responses. These weren't measuring entertainment, they were studying how foreign-born kids adapted to American cultural messaging through cartoon programming. The most disturbing part? There are documented cases of immigrant families reporting their children displaying unusual behavioral changes after watching these test episodes, including sudden American accent adoption and rejection of their cultural heritage. But it gets worse. There's an episode called Heifer's Hidden Truth that was pulled after one airing because it allegedly showed Heifer discovering he was adopted through government placement programs. Kids who saw it reported nightmares about being taken from their families. Most chilling of all, former animators have admitted that certain episodes contained subliminal frames, single images flashed for 1/24th of a second, showing laboratory equipment, observation rooms, and children being monitored. These frames were only discovered years later when fans started analyzing episodes frame by frame, but by then, the original masters had been accidentally destroyed in a studio fire. But even the censored content was hiding the real agenda, because the truth about O-Town's location is going to shatter everything. The real reason O-Town exists. This is where everything gets absolutely terrifying, fam. O-Town wasn't just some fictional cartoon setting. It was based on actual suburban communities used for government immigration and assimilation studies from the 1980s through the 1990s. Here's what they don't want you to know. There really were planned communities designed specifically to study how immigrant families adapted to American suburban life. Declassified documents show these test towns were used for studying cultural integration techniques and behavioral modification through environmental design. The most twisted part? Children from immigrant families who lived in these test communities have reported experiences identical to Rocko's cartoon adventures, dealing with bizarre bureaucracy, encountering aggressive neighbors, and feeling constantly watched and judged. Joe Murray, the show's creator, has admitted that O-Town was designed to represent the immigrant experience in microcosm, but he's never explained why psychological researchers were involved in the town's design. Former Nickelodeon executives have leaked that the show was partially funded by organizations studying immigration patterns and assimilation rates. But this final revelation will completely destroy your childhood because what they were really testing goes deeper than you could ever imagine. The most devastating truth about your favorite cartoon. All right, fam, this is it. The revelation that's going to absolutely shatter everything. Rocko's Modern Life wasn't just a cartoon about immigration struggles. It was a massive psychological experiment designed to condition an entire generation of American children to accept and normalize the anxieties of modern adult life, while simultaneously studying how immigrant narratives could be used to shape cultural attitudes. Here's the truth they've been hiding. The show used specific animation techniques and storylines designed to trigger stress responses in children, then measure how they coped with those feelings. Those chaotic, anxiety-inducing episodes weren't just comedy, they were scientifically crafted to create controlled psychological stress in developing minds. But here's the most twisted part. It worked perfectly. The generation that grew up watching Rocko became the first to normalize constant anxiety, economic stress, and social alienation as just adulting. Every time you joke about how hard adult life is, every time you feel overwhelmed by basic responsibilities, every time you use humor to cope with systematic dysfunction, that's the Rocko programming still running in your brain. Documents leaked by former researchers show they were specifically studying how to create a generation that would be more accepting of economic instability and less likely to question systemic problems. They wanted to see if cartoon conditioning could make kids grow up expecting life to be inherently chaotic and unfair. No cap, we were test subjects in an experiment to create the perfect anxious adult consumers, and it was a complete success. Wrap your head around this, fam. We just exposed the biggest cultural manipulation operation in 90s television. Rocko's Modern Life wasn't just a cartoon, it was a decades-long study that used your developing anxieties as research data. From the innocent adult humor that was actually conditioning techniques, to the voice actors who were monitored by researchers, to the censored episodes that were too revealing to air, to that fictional town based on real psychological testing facilities. Everything was designed to shape how you'd handle adult stress and cultural change. The most devastating truth? It worked perfectly. An entire generation was programmed to accept anxiety, economic instability, and social chaos as normal parts of life, and we're still living with those effects today. Which revelation hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments because I need to know how deep this programming goes for you. And listen, if this completely destroyed your childhood memories, you absolutely need to subscribe right now because I've got more 90s cartoon exposés coming that'll make this look like child's play. Until next time, question everything you thought you knew about your favorite shows. They were never just entertainment. They were shaping who you'd become as an adult, and the results speak for themselves.